Good evening, friends. I want to thank you all for being here because what I have to say tonight is not easy to hear. The title of my talk, America is in far deeper trouble than I anticipated, is not a piece of rhetoric. It is an admission. For decades, I have studied capitalism, its cycles, its crisis, its capacity to reinvent itself. I have watched it stagger, fall, and get back up again, often at great human cost. But I must tell you what we are witnessing in the United States today goes beyond the ordinary turbulence of capitalism. We are watching a system unravel, not just economically, but socially, politically, and morally. We've been told again and again that things just are the way they are, that the economy is too complicated to change, that inequality is unfortunate but inevitable, that ordinary people should work hard, keep quiet, and trust that someday, somehow, the system will reward them. But that is the greatest myth of our time, a myth designed to keep you passive while others make decisions that shape your life. The truth, my friends, is that decline is not destiny. Systems are not natural laws. They are human creations built by people, maintained by people, and changed by people when the burden of injustice becomes too heavy to bear. Every time in history, when humanity stood at the edge of collapse, when people thought there was no way forward, there were those who refused to accept the story they were being told. When workers in the 19th century were told they were lucky just to have a job, they organized unions. When women were told politics wasn't their place, they built movements that changed constitutions. When enslaved people were told freedom was impossible, they rose up and made it reality. Change has never come from the top. It has always come from the bottom, from those who dared to believe that the impossible could in fact be achieved. Right now in the United States, we are living through a moment of enormous uncertainty. Wages stagnate while profits soar. Debt piles up while opportunities shrink. The media tells us to tighten our belts, to be patient, to trust the markets. But the markets were not designed to serve you. They were designed to serve those who already own and control. The working majority is told to accept decline as a natural stage of life under capitalism, as if poverty and insecurity were acts of nature rather than the results of conscious choices made by those in power. That's the first great lie we must unlearn. Nothing about our economic system is inevitable. The structure of work, the distribution of wealth, the priorities of our government, all of it was designed by people sitting in rooms, making decisions based on profit, not on human need. If they can design a system that benefits them, we can design one that benefits us. But that will never happen if we believe decline is destiny. It begins when we stop apologizing for demanding better. Better wages, better schools, better health care, better futures. Imagine if instead of accepting the narrative of decline, we embrace the power of collective redesign. Imagine if workers in every industry understood that they are the true creators of wealth and therefore should have a democratic voice in how that wealth is used. Imagine if the next generation of young people burdened by student debt and disillusionment refused to believe that struggle and sacrifice are the only paths to survival. Change begins in the imagination when people allow themselves to see beyond what is and begin to envision what could be. The hook, the spark, the turning point comes when people realize that resignation is the quiet companion of decay. The moment you stop believing things can change, you start participating in their continuation. Every empire that has fallen, every economic order that has collapsed, first began to rot in the minds of its citizens when they decided it could not be different. But once people remember that they built the world as it is, they also remember they can rebuild it. Decline is not a sentence, it's a story, and stories can be rewritten. The American people have faced crisis after crisis and emerged stronger when they refused to bow their heads. The labor movements of the early 20th century, the civil rights struggles of the 1960s, the wave of grassroots activism rising again today. All of these remind us that power lies not in the hands of the few, but in the courage of the many. So do not accept decline as destiny. Refuse the cynicism that says your voice doesn't matter. Stand up, speak out, organize, and remind those who benefit from your silence that history has never been kind to those who underestimate the power of the people. That is where change begins. Not in policy papers or corporate boardrooms, but in the human spirit that refuses to surrender. When you reclaim the belief that you can alter the course of your own society, decline ends and transformation begins. Power. It is a word that makes many people uncomfortable, yet it defines the world we live in. Every decision that shapes your life, your wages, your working hours, your health care, even the cost of your rent, is a reflection of who holds power and who does not. For too long, working people in America have been taught that power belongs somewhere else, in the boardrooms, in Washington, in the hands of executives and investors. We've been conditioned to believe that the workplace is a dictatorship. We must simply accept a place where orders flow from the top down and our role is to obey. But real democracy does not stop at the voting booth. It must extend to the places where we spend most of our lives, our workplaces, our communities, and the institutions that shape our daily existence. Reclaiming power where we work and live is not only possible, it is essential if we are to build a society worthy of the word democracy. Think about the absurdity of our current arrangement. In a political democracy, we are told that every citizen's voice matters, that government should be accountable to the people. Yet when we walk into work on Monday morning, that principle disappears. Suddenly we find ourselves in a miniature monarchy. A handful of owners or executives make all the decisions what to produce, how to produce it, where to sell it, and what to do with the profits. The workers, those whose labor actually makes everything possible, are excluded from the process entirely. This contradiction sits at the heart of capitalism, democracy in the streets, autocracy at work. And as long as we accept that contradiction, we will never truly be free. The hook here is simple but powerful. Imagine if your workplace was run the way we claim to want our society to be, collectively, democratically, with transparency and shared purpose. Imagine if you and your coworkers had a say in how profits were distributed, how hours were set, how safety was ensured. Imagine if every major company in America functioned not as a private kingdom, but as a community of equals. This is not fantasy. It is a model that already exists and thrives in worker cooperatives around the world. From the Mandragon Corporation in Spain to smaller cooperatives across the United States, these enterprises prove that efficiency and democracy can coexist, that workplaces can be both productive and humane when power is shared rather than hoarded. Reclaiming power also means reimagining what leadership looks like. It's not about removing bosses for the sake of chaos. It's about replacing hierarchy with accountability. When workers have ownership and voice, leadership becomes a responsibility, not a privilege. It is chosen, not imposed. Decisions are made with the collective good in mind, not the narrow interests of shareholders who have never set foot in the factory or office. This shift transforms work from a place of alienation into a space of purpose. People begin to care not just about surviving the workday, but about improving the work itself and the community it sustains. And let's be clear, this isn't just an economic argument, it's a moral one. When we allow others to dictate the terms of our labor, we surrender not just our time, but our dignity. We internalize the idea that we are replaceable, that our value is measured only by the profit we generate for someone else. Reclaiming power means reclaiming that dignity. It means looking at your labor and saying, this is mine, my work, my effort, my creativity should not enrich someone who contributes nothing but capital. Some will tell you that this vision is unrealistic, that it cannot work at scale. But those same voices told us that slavery could not be abolished, that women could not vote, that workers could not unionize. Every expansion of democracy in history was dismissed as impossible until people made it inevitable. The moment we believe that democracy belongs everywhere, including our workplaces, is the moment we begin to dismantle the machinery of exploitation. Reclaiming power where you work and live is not about tearing things down. It's about building something better. It's about turning workplaces into communities where people are respected, where decisions are shared, and where the rewards of labor flow to those who actually earn them. It's about recognizing that the same principles we celebrate in civic life, representation, fairness, and equality, must apply to the economic sphere as well. Because until democracy reaches the shop floor, it will remain incomplete. And once it does, we will not only transform our workplaces, we will transform the very soul of our society. Division is the oldest and most effective weapon of the powerful. Those who control wealth and influence have always understood one thing very clearly. United people are dangerous. When workers, citizens, and communities recognize their shared struggles and common interests, they become an unstoppable force capable of transforming society. But when they are divided by race, religion, gender, region, or political label, they are weakened, distracted, and easier to control. That is the tragic story of America's working majority, a people with immense potential, fragmented into competing camps, each suspicious of the other, while the real beneficiaries of this division watch from the top and count their profits. The hook is this: every time you look down on someone who struggles like you, someone else gets richer. Every time you believe that your neighbor is your enemy, someone in power breathes a sigh of relief, because division keeps the system exactly as it is. The wealthy and powerful do not need to silence the public if the public can be convinced to silence itself through mistrust and hatred. This is the sleight of hand of modern capitalism. It hides class struggle beneath 1,000 other battles. It tells you that the problem isn't the system. It's the other worker, the immigrant, the voter from another state, the person who looks or believes differently from you. And while we are busy fighting one another, the same small elite continues to extract the fruits of our labor, shaping policy and consolidating control. But solidarity, real solidarity, cuts through that illusion like a blade. It is not about pretending our differences don't exist. It is about recognizing that those differences have been weaponized to prevent us from seeing our shared humanity. When a nurse in New York, a factory worker in Ohio, and a teacher in Texas begin to understand that they face the same structural exploitation, that they are victims of the same system, prioritizing profit over people, something powerful begins to stir. The realization dawns that their struggles are not isolated incidents, but interconnected symptoms of a deeper disease. And once that awareness takes root, it cannot easily be extinguished. History offers countless lessons in the power of solidarity. When workers stood together to demand the 8-hour workday, they were beaten, arrested, and ridiculed. But they won. When civil rights activists united across races and religions to challenge Jim Crow, they faced violence and hatred, but they changed the law and the conscience of a nation. When people around the world have linked arms to demand justice, they have always faced resistance, but they have also reshaped history. Solidarity is not an abstract ideal. It is a force that builds movements, topples regimes, and births revolutions. It is the heartbeat of democracy itself. And yet today we live in a culture that glorifies individualism. We are told that success is personal and failure is personal, that the only thing standing between us and prosperity is our own effort. It's a seductive story because it flatters the ego, but it is also a lie. The truth is that no one rises entirely alone. Every opportunity you have ever had was built upon the labor, sacrifice, and cooperation of countless others, teachers, workers, families, and communities. Solidarity is the recognition of that interdependence, the understanding that our lives are bound together whether we acknowledge it or not. The real challenge, then, is to replace suspicion with empathy, competition with cooperation, and isolation with unity. That begins in small ways, supporting your coworkers, listening instead of judging, joining movements that fight for the collective good rather than narrow self-interest. It means refusing to be manipulated by those who profit from division. When you hear rhetoric that blames your neighbor for your hardship, ask yourself who benefits from your anger. When a corporation pits unionized workers against non-unionized ones or full-time employees against part-time contractors, recognize that strategy for what it is, a calculated attempt to keep you from realizing your shared power. Solidarity is not sentimental. It is strategic. It is how ordinary people counterbalance the immense resources of the few. One voice can be ignored, but millions cannot. When people across lines of difference stand together, they expose the system's greatest fear, collective action, because the powerful know something many of us forget. The moment we see one another not as competitors, but as comrades, their control begins to crumble. So the next time you feel divided from someone when struggling just as you are, remember that solidarity is not weakness. It is the foundation of strength. It is the bridge between despair and transformation, between surviving and truly living. Crisis has a way of revealing who we truly are. It strips away illusion, comfort, and pretense, leaving only the raw truth of a society's condition. And today, America finds itself at such a moment. We are told that our economy is strong, that progress is being made, that we simply need patience. But everywhere we look, we see strain and fatigue. People are working harder than ever and falling further behind. Families are juggling 2 or 3 jobs to afford what one income once covered. The young are buried in debt before they begin, and the old fear outving their savings. This is not an isolated misfortune. It is a systemic crisis, economic, social, and moral, and it is deeper than many of us dared to believe. Yet within every crisis there is a spark, a chance to turn despair into courage, pain into purpose, and decline into transformation. The hook, the awakening moment, is this crisis does not just destroy, it exposes. It exposes the truth that our system was never built to serve everyone, only to preserve the interests of a few. When the economy crashes, when wages stagnate, when millions lose jobs, while billionaires double their fortunes, the mask comes off, we begin to see that the suffering of the many is not accidental. It is the price of a structure designed for inequality. And once that truth is seen, it cannot easily be unseen. The challenge then is not to run from crisis, but to face it with clarity and courage, to use it as the fuel for collective change. History teaches us that courage does not appear when things are comfortable. It arises when ordinary people pushed to their limits decide that fear is no longer an option. The Great Depression of the 1930s could have ended in chaos in total, social breakdown. But it also produced the labor movements, the social security system, and the New Deal reforms that redefined America for a generation. The civil rights struggles of the 1960s were born out of unbearable injustice, yet they gave birth to progress that reshaped the nation's conscience. Every period of deep crisis without exception has opened the door to both collapse and renewal. Which path we take depends entirely on how we respond, whether we choose resignation or resistance, silence or solidarity, despair or courage. Courage, however, is not simply the absence of fear. It is the decision to act in spite of it. It is the voice that says, yes, this system is broken, but I refuse to let it define the future. Courage begins the moment people realize that the world they were told to accept is not the world they must live in. When workers strike for fair wages, when students demand affordable education, when citizens challenge corruption and corporate greed, they are not just reacting to crisis. They are redefining what is possible. That is the essence of transformation, taking the worst conditions and turning them into the foundation for something better. The system counts on your exhaustion. It counts on your cynicism. It whispers that nothing will ever change, that resistance is futile, that those in power are untouchable. But history mocks that arrogance. No empire, no economic order, no hierarchy of privilege has ever been immune to the will of the people once it awakens. The courage to confront crisis begins with small acts, speaking out, organizing, questioning the narratives fed to you. It grows as people realize they are not alone, that their struggles are shared, and that collective action magnifies individual bravery into a force capable of shifting history. Crisis should not be the end of hope. It should be the beginning of vision. When systems fail, imagination must take their place. This is the time to imagine an economy where work is dignified, where housing and healthcare are human rights, where education liberates instead of enslaves, and where democracy extends beyond elections into every corner of life. Those visions are not they are necessary. Every major achievement of human progress, from the abolition of slavery to universal suffrage to workers' rights, was once dismissed as impossible until it became inevitable through courage and persistence. So when you look at the crisis surrounding us today, rising inequality, political paralysis, ecological disaster, do not look away in despair. See them for what they truly are, the birth pangs of transformation. The question is not whether change will come, but who will shape it. Fear keeps you waiting for rescue. Courage compels you to become the rescuer. The powerful want you to feel hopeless, because hopeless people do not organize, do not challenge, do not dream. But once courage replaces fear, once clarity replaces confusion, the landscape of possibility shifts. Crisis then becomes not the story of our downfall, but the moment we rediscover our power to rise. So yes, America is in deeper trouble than I anticipated. Not because of some mysterious external threat, but because we have allowed our own system to corrode from within. But I also believe that within that crisis lies opportunity. Every breakdown opens the door to transformation. The movements for labor rights, for economic democracy, for workplace cooperatives, for universal health care, for housing as a human right. These are not fringe ideas. They are the seeds of a new kind of economy, one that puts people before profit, democracy before hierarchy, and sustainability before short-term gain.